Naledi Makona had never liked hospitals. The sharp smell of disinfectant clung to her clothes, the echo of footsteps down tiled corridors made her restless, and the way everything was too white, too sterile, unsettled her. Yet, for nearly a year, the hospital in Johannesburg had been her second home. At 28, she should have been standing in front of her class, chalk dust on her hands, laughter spilling from her students' mouths. She should have been chasing lesson plans, not doctor's appointments, grading assignments, not signing consent forms for endless tests. Instead, she had been waiting, suspended in a cruel limbo. Her heart had betrayed her. When the cardiologist first told her she needed a transplant, she'd sat there in silence, the words clanging in her skull. She had thought, "I'm too young. My life hasn't even begun." But the truth was undeniable. Every climb up the school stairs left her breathless. Every walk to the corner sponsor shop ended in chest pains. Her body had become a cage, the walls closing in, pressing tighter every day. Then, one rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled over the city, the phone call came. A donor heart had been found. Naledi dropped to her knees in her tiny flat, tears mixing with the scent of wet earth drifting through the open window. In that moment, joy and grief collided. For her to live, someone else had died. The surgery was brutal. Naledi woke up in ICU with tubes and machines surrounding her, her chest bandaged, her throat raw from the ventilator. She felt like her body had been cracked open and stitched back together by strangers, which, in truth, it had. Recovery was slow and agonizing. Every movement burned. Her mother, Lerato, visited daily, sitting at her bedside with prayers and soft hands, sometimes spoon-feeding her amphikoko when hospital food made her gag.
"You're going to live, my star,"
Lerato whispered one evening, kissing her forehead.
"God has given you another chance."
Naledi nodded, but inside she wasn't sure. Because it didn't feel like just a chance. It felt like she was carrying someone else's story inside her chest. She tried not to think about the donor, about the family who had said goodbye so she could say hello again. But at night, when the hospital ward grew quiet, she would press her palm against the scar over her chest and whisper, "Thank you. Whoever you are." That's when the dreams began. The first night, it was faint. She was floating in darkness, not frightening, but endless, like being suspended in warm water. From the shadows came a melody. A lullaby. Soft, haunting, wordless. Just humming, a slow tune that rose and fell like the sway of a cradle. Naledi woke up startled, her heart hammering in her ribs. Weird side effect of the meds, she told herself. But the melody clung to her, threading through her thoughts even as the nurse checked her blood pressure, even as she forced down spoonfuls of pap and gravy. By the third dream, she was unsettled. It wasn't just music anymore, it was intimate, like someone breathing into her ear, like arms wrapping around her in the dark. And yet, she didn't know the song. She had never heard it before in her life. One afternoon, while her doctor did his rounds, she almost confessed. Almost said, "Doctor, I keep hearing music in my dreams." But the words froze on her tongue. He would smile politely, write it off as stress or medication hallucinations, maybe adjust her dosage. And her mother would scold her gently. "You've been through a lot, baby. Stop scaring yourself with silly thoughts." So Naledi kept it to herself. 3 weeks later, she was discharged. Walking out of the hospital felt like stepping into a new world. The sky seemed impossibly blue. The sun burned gold against her skin. Even the traffic noise, usually a nuisance, sounded alive, vibrant, a symphony of life she hadn't heard in months. But the lullaby followed her home. Her little flat in Soweto had been cleaned by her cousins, everything dusted and rearranged as if to welcome her back to life. At night, her bed felt strange, too soft compared to the hospital mattress. Yet, as soon as sleep came, so did the song. The same tune. The same tenderness. It unnerved her. This wasn't random, wasn't a fleeting dream. It was deliberate, persistent. Some mornings she woke up humming. Once, while washing dishes, she froze when she realized she was softly singing the lullaby under her breath. She gripped the edge of the sink, the soapy water dripping from her hands. She didn't know this song. How could her lips form notes her mind had never learned? The thought sent a cold ripple down her spine. A week after her return home, the dream intensified. She wasn't just floating anymore, she felt warmth, the sense of someone near her, though she couldn't see a face. The melody swelled, wrapping tighter around her. Naledi's chest ached, not with the sharp sting of healing stitches, but with a deep, hollow longing. When she woke, her pillow was damp with tears. She sat up, clutching her chest, her breath ragged. Her lips moved before she realized it, the lullaby spilling out like a confession. The sound startled her. She clapped a hand over her mouth. And then, into the silence of her bedroom, Naledi whispered a question that chilled her to the bone. 2 months after her surgery, Naledi finally dared to venture beyond her neighborhood. The doctors had warned her, take it slow, don't push your body, avoid crowded spaces. But Naledi was tired of being treated like glass. She wanted to feel alive again. To walk among people who weren't nurses or relatives, to smell street food frying, to hear the chaos of the city. So, on a Saturday afternoon, she took a taxi into the heart of Johannesburg. The city pulsed with energy. Minibus taxis screeched to a stop, their drivers hanging out of windows shouting destinations. Hawkers sold everything from avocados to cheap sunglasses. Music thumped from a sponsor shop, mixing with the chatter of pedestrians and the distant honk of traffic. Naledi's chest tightened, not from pain, but from awe. For so long, she had been trapped indoors, hearing life only through her window. Now she was part of it again. She wandered toward Maboneng Precinct, drawn by its promise of art and music. Walls were painted with bold graffiti murals, colors shouting louder than the city itself. Cafes spilled onto sidewalks, their tables crowded with young people laughing over cappuccinos. A group of dancers spun on the pavement, a crowd cheering them on. And then, the sound. It came soft at first, almost lost in the noise. A guitar. A gentle strum, deliberate, unhurried. Naledi froze. The melody floated above the chaos, weaving its way through the noise like smoke. Her pulse quickened. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the lullaby. The exact tune that had haunted her dreams for weeks, now alive in the open air. Naledi's legs carried her before she realized she was moving. She pushed through the crowd, eyes darting, searching for the source of the music. Her palms were clammy, her heart hammering so hard she feared it would rip through her chest. There he was. A man sat on a low stool near the edge of the square, a battered guitar resting against his thigh. He was in his early 30s, his frame lean, his posture calm, almost solemn. A simple denim shirt clung to his shoulders, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His skin was a rich, warm brown, his hair cropped short. But it was his eyes that startled her, they were closed, as if the world had vanished and only the song remained. He played with devotion, his fingers coaxing out notes that dripped like honey. Naledi's throat tightened. This wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. She stood there, unmoving, as people passed around her, dropping coins into the open guitar case at his feet. A young couple leaned against each other, swaying to the music. A child stopped, clapping along to the rhythm, though the tune was hardly made for clapping. But Naledi couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. It was as if the song tethered her to the ground. When the last note lingered and faded, the man opened his eyes. They swept briefly over the crowd, landing on her for the briefest moment. Naledi's stomach lurched. She looked away quickly, embarrassed, as if she had been caught trespassing in someone else's dream. Still, she stayed until he played again. Another song this time, something upbeat, a tune people clapped to. The spell of the lullaby was broken, but Naledi's heartbeat was still racing, her skin buzzing. When he paused to sip water from a plastic bottle, she forced herself to step closer. Her voice wobbled when she spoke.
That first song, what's it called?
The man looked up. His eyes were dark, deep, carrying a quiet sadness that startled her. He studied her for a moment before answering.
It doesn't have a name,
he said softly. His voice matched his music, low, steady, deliberate.
it's personal.
Oh,
Naledi swallowed. Her lips wanted to form more words, but her mind was a jumble. She nodded awkwardly and stepped back, heat rushing to her cheeks.
Do you like it?
He asked suddenly. She blinked.
yes. It's beautiful.
A shadow of a smile touched his mouth.
Thank you.
And just like that, he strummed again, his focus shifting back to the guitar, to the crowd, to the music. Naledi stood there a moment longer before retreating, her heart pounding. On the taxi ride home, she stared out the window, the city rushing past in blurs of color and movement. But her mind wasn't on the graffiti or the busy streets. It was on him. On the way his fingers moved across the strings. On the way his eyes had carried sadness, as if the song itself was stitched to grief. On the fact that the lullaby from her dreams, her secret lullaby, was his. That night, Naledi couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the memory replayed. The sound of his guitar, the way the lullaby had wrapped around the crowd but somehow pierced only her. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, one hand pressed against the scar over her chest. Whose song was this? And why did her new heart beat faster every time she remembered it? Naledi told herself she wouldn't go back. That seeing the musician had been a strange, one-time coincidence. That chasing after him would make her seem desperate, even mad. But the truth gnawed at her, the lullaby wasn't random. It belonged to him, and somehow, through some cruel twist of fate, it belonged to her too. 2 days later, she found herself boarding another taxi to Mabening. Her mother had warned her not to overexert herself, but Naledi couldn't sit at home with the melody scratching at her chest like claws. She needed answers. The square was lively again, music and chatter colliding in the open air. But the man, he wasn't there. Naledi's stomach sank. She wandered the streets, weaving between art stalls and food vendors, listening for the familiar strum of his guitar. Hours passed, her legs aching, but no sign of him. That night, the lullaby returned in her dreams, sharper, more insistent. She woke with her pillow damp from sweat and her heart pounding as if it wanted to leap from her chest. By the fourth visit, she found him again. He was in Newtown this time, near Mary Fitzgerald Square, seated on a folding stool, his guitar case open for coins. The lullaby was already spilling into the evening air, wrapping around the square like invisible threads. Naledi's knees nearly gave out. She waited until the crowd thinned, until only a few stragglers lingered. Then she stepped closer, her courage trembling but steady enough to hold her upright.
You play here often?
She asked. The man glanced up, his eyes catching hers.
Different places. Different nights. Why?
I've been looking for you.
The words slipped out before she could stop them. His brows furrowed slightly, suspicion flickering across his face.
Looking for me? We don't know each other.
No,
Naledi admitted, her voice dropping.
but I know that song.
He stilled. His hand, resting on the guitar strings, tightened slightly.
This one.
She nodded.
The lullaby. I hear it in my sleep.
For a moment, silence stretched between them. The city noise seemed to fade, the two of them cocooned in something fragile and unspoken. Then he shook his head, as though dismissing her words.
It's not possible.
He said quietly.
Why not?
Because
He said, his voice almost breaking.
that song belonged to someone who's gone.
Naledi's breath caught.
Who?
He hesitated. Then he set his guitar aside, his gaze distant.
Her name was Nkosi. She was my fiancée.
The name hit Naledi like a fist.
She used to hum that lullaby.
He continued, voice thick with memory.
Said it came to her in childhood. She sang it when she was happy, when she was nervous, when she was tired. I can't even play it without thinking of her.
Naledi's mouth was dry. Her pulse thundered in her ears.
What happened to her?
She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man's eyes darkened, grief clouding them like a storm.
Car accident. A year ago. She didn't survive.
Naledi staggered back, her heart pounding so violently she feared it would give out again. Thandi. The name echoed inside her skull, clashing with the lullaby, with her scar, with the donor she had never known. Could it be? She stumbled out a few polite words, thank you, sorry for your loss, before fleeing into the night, her chest heaving. The city spun around her, neon lights blurring, taxis honking, vendors shouting. She barely made it into a cab before the sobs broke loose. At home, she tore through the folder of hospital documents she had shoved into her bedside drawer. The donor's identity was sealed, of course, but there were hints: age, gender, the time of donation. Female. 27. Died in an accident. Naledi's fingers shook so hard she dropped the papers. It was her. It had to be her. Nkosi's heart was beating in her chest. The lullaby wasn't a dream. It was a memory. Naledi pressed her palm against her scar, her breath coming fast. This isn't real, she whispered, but her body betrayed her, her lips were already humming the tune, unbidden, unstoppable. And beneath it all, a terror she couldn't shake. The heart inside her didn't just keep her alive. It remembered. Naledi avoided Mabening for a week. She told herself she needed distance, that she should let the discovery settle before doing something reckless. But her heart, her borrowed heart, betrayed her. Every night, the lullaby returned, stronger, almost insistent. She would wake up humming, sometimes with her cheeks wet from tears she didn't remember shedding. It was as if the melody was pulling her back to him. To Saiful. One Thursday evening, she gave in. She found him again, this time near Gandhi Square, his guitar balanced on his knee, eyes closed as he played. When his gaze lifted and met hers, a flicker of recognition passed between them.
You again.
He said quietly when she approached.
I couldn't stay away.
The words stumbled out, raw and unpolished. He studied her for a long moment, then gestured to the empty stool beside him. She sat, her pulse quickening, the scent of his cologne, something woody and faint, curling into her senses. For a while, they didn't speak. Saiful strummed, Naledi listened, and the city bustled around them. When he finally set the guitar down, he asked,
Why that song? Why does it matter to you?
Naledi hesitated. She couldn't tell him everything, not yet. Instead, she said,
It feels familiar. Like I've known it my whole life, even though I haven't.
Saiful's jaw tightened.
That's how I felt about Thandi. She had this way of making the ordinary feel like it had always belonged to you.
Hearing her name made Naledi's throat ache. She wanted to say her heart is inside me. That's why your song lives in me. But the words lodged in her chest. Over the next days, they kept meeting. Sometimes by chance, sometimes because Naledi lingered in places she knew he played. Conversation came easier with each encounter. They spoke about books, about music, about the stubbornness of Johannesburg traffic. Saifo had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and when he laughed, really laughed, the sound felt like sunlight after rain. Yet every moment carried shadows. Saifo would pause sometimes, watching her with a strange expression. Once, while she licked her ice cream cone, he whispered.
Then he used to do that, close her eyes like she was tasting something holy.
Another time, she teased him for always carrying his guitar, and he smiled sadly.
Then he said I'd be buried with it.
Naledi laughed with him, but inside, she trembled. Because it wasn't just him. It was her too. She craved things she had never liked before, mango atchar, rooibos tea with honey. She caught herself using words her mother insisted she'd never used. Once, when Saifo told a joke, she finished his punchline before he said it. His face went pale, like a ghost had walked through him.
You sounded exactly like her.
He whispered. Naledi pressed her hands together in her lap to stop their shaking. At night, lying awake in her flat, she asked herself the same question again and again, are these my feelings, or hers? Because she was falling for him. There was no denying it. His voice soothed her, his presence steadied her. The way his fingers moved over the guitar strings made her chest ache in ways she couldn't name. But was it love, or memory? Was it Naledi choosing, or Thandi's heart remembering? One evening, Saifo walked her home. They stopped outside her building, the Johannesburg night alive with distant sirens and the hum of taxis. He shoved his hands into his pockets, staring at the ground.
I need to be honest,
he said. His voice was low, strained.
I don't understand what's happening. Being with you, it feels wrong and right at the same time. Wrong because I love Thandi. Right because, when I'm with you, I forget to grieve for a little while.
Naledi's throat tightened. She wanted to confess everything, that Thandi's heart beat inside her chest, that the lullaby wasn't just haunting her but living in her. But fear held her back. Instead, she whispered.
Maybe we don't need to understand it yet.
Saifo looked up at her, his eyes full of conflict.
And if I'm just falling for her shadow?
Naledi reached for his hand, her fingers trembling as they brushed his.
And if I'm just loving you because of her?
The silence between them was unbearable. Then, slowly, his hand closed around hers. Warm. Steady. Naledi's heart thundered, echoing in her ears. For a terrifying second, she wasn't sure if the beat was hers, or Thandi's. The decision pressed on Naledi's chest like a stone. For weeks she had carried the lullaby inside her, the secret thrumming between her and Saifo. Every time he strummed his guitar, every time his eyes softened toward her, the truth clanged louder. She could no longer pretend this was ordinary. He deserved to know. She invited him to a small cafe tucked into a quiet corner of Mabening, far from the buzz of his usual street corners. They sat across from each other at a wooden table, mugs of rooibos cooling untouched. Naledi's hands trembled in her lap, and she forced them still.
I need to tell you something.
She began, her voice unsteady. Saifo leaned forward, his gaze open, searching.
You look like you're carrying a weight. Talk to me.
Naledi's throat tightened. She inhaled slowly, letting the truth rise like a tide.
I wasn't supposed to be here.
She said.
Not really. I was dying, Saifo. My heart was failing. 6 months ago, I was on a waiting list for a transplant. Without it.
She shook her head. Saifo froze, his fingers curling against his cup.
You had a transplant.
Yes.
She met his eyes, holding the silence.
The woman who gave me this heart, her name was Tandy.
His breath caught. The name hit him like a chord struck too hard. He pulled back slightly, staring at her as if she'd spoken a ghost into the room. Naledi pressed on, though her voice cracked.
Since the surgery, I've been having dreams. Always the same. A song, soft and familiar, like someone humming to me in the dark. At first, I thought it was the medication. But the melody never left me.
She swallowed hard.
When I found you playing that lullaby on the street, I knew. It was the same song. It was hers, wasn't it?
Saifo's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes glistened as he looked at her, no, through her, as though searching for Tandy in the shape of Naledi's face.
That was our song.
He whispered at last. His voice cracked like dry wood.
Tandy used to hum it when she thought no one was listening. I put it to strings for her. No one else knew it.
Naledi felt tears prick her eyes. She wanted to reach for him, to bridge the distance with touch, but her own confession held her still.
I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid.
She admitted.
Afraid this, whatever is between us, isn't mine. That it belongs to her. That my heart remembers you, even if my mind doesn't.
For a long moment, Saifo said nothing. The cafe clattered around them, dishes clinking, muted laughter, a distant hiss of steaming milk, but between them stretched a silence thick enough to drown in. Finally, Saifo rubbed his face with both hands and exhaled a shaky breath.
Naledi, do you know what this means for me? I've been trying to understand why I felt pulled to you. Why your laugh felt familiar. Why being with you made me feel alive again. And now I know. It wasn't just you. It was her.
Naledi flinched, but forced herself to listen.
When I look at you, he said softly, I see you. But when I hear your heartbeat, when I sit close enough, it's her I remember. Tandy. And I don't know how to separate that. I don't know if I can.
Naledi's chest ached, not with the illness that once plagued her, but with the cruel paradox of love and loss. She blinked away tears, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart.
I thought this new heart would only keep me alive.
She said.
I didn't know it would carry someone else's story too. But I've realized something, Saifo. I can't build a life where I'm always wondering if I'm enough on my own. Love has to be chosen freely, not borrowed. Not because my chest echoes her song.
Her words landed heavy, but true. Saifo reached across the table, his hand hovering before resting gently over hers. His touch was warm, trembling.
I wish things were different.
He whispered.
If you'd come into my life another way, maybe. But now, every feeling is tangled. Loving you feels like betraying her, and loving her through you feels like betraying you.
Naledi's tears fell freely then. Yet beneath the grief was a strange, calm acceptance.
Then maybe the kindest thing we can do is let each other go.
They left the cafe together, stepping into the Johannesburg night. The city hummed around them, cars, laughter, distant music, but between them stretched a quiet, fragile space. On a corner beneath a flickering street lamp, Saifo set down his guitar case and drew the instrument into his arms. He didn't ask, Naledi didn't stop him. He began to play. The lullaby floated into the air, gentle and aching. Each note curled like smoke, weaving memory and sorrow together. Naledi stood close, eyes closed, letting the song wash over her one last time. She didn't hum along. Not this time. The melody wasn't hers to keep. When the final note faded, Saifo lowered his guitar, his eyes shimmering in the lamplight. Naledi stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper.
Thank you, Tandy. and goodbye.
Saipho reached out, brushed her fingers once, soft, fleeting, then let go. Naledi turned, her footsteps steady as she walked into the sprawl of city lights. Her heart beat strong within her chest. Not for Thandi. Not for Saipho. But for herself. Behind her, the lullaby echoed into the night, then disappeared into silence. Months slipped by. Naledi carried on with her teaching, her life stitched together with small, steady joys, children's laughter, quiet sunsets, the comfort of her own breath in her chest. The lullaby no longer haunted her dreams. Sometimes, she caught a fragment of it on the wind, but it no longer held her hostage. One Saturday, she wandered into a community arts fair in Soweto. Music floated from every corner, lively and bright. Naledi was studying a painting when a familiar laugh brushed her ears. She turned. Saipho stood a few meters away, guitar slung casually across his back. He wasn't alone. Beside him was a tall, broad-shouldered man with an easy grin. Saipho noticed her first. Their eyes met, no ache, no pull, only quiet recognition, like seeing a photograph from another life.
This is my friend Kobelo,
Saipho said when they reached her. His voice was warm, steady. Naledi offered a polite smile, but Kobelo's gaze lingered on her with a spark she hadn't felt in a long time. For a moment, the world thinned, as though the air had bent toward them both. Naledi's heart quickened, not with borrowed memory, but with something new, something hers. Kobelo smiled, wide and genuine. And for the first time since her surgery, Naledi realized her new heart wasn't holding her back. It was leading her forward, to a love untangled from the past, a love that could begin in the present. A different song had started.